and Margaret Williams. I help marginalized leaders survive power systems and start leading with freedom, influence, and authority. Okay? And today I am honored to have Tig here with me today. And we're talking about you've got to own it. Okay?
You've got to
You
own it.
got to own it. All right? Yes. So so Tig, I remember you had reached out to me and said, "Hey, let's do some collaborations." Okay, you got some amazing work going on over there, and I am honored to work on these projects with you. Okay, because you're such an important and an influential person within the Substack community and beyond. And you're like, "Oh, I'm not a leader." I'm like, "Oh, yes, you are. Each and every one of us is a leader." Okay. And so Tig, I'm just gonna call you Tig, and you can tell everybody your last name because I don't want to butcher your name. But Tig is the creator and author of Tigology, okay? A Substack publication described as a magazine for a community of young travelers and beautiful weirdos. I love that, okay? Because I always felt I was a weirdo. Anyway, most people felt like I was a weirdo. So I'm like, okay, well, we're in good company, okay? So
Oh yeah.
your mission, Tig's mission is to focus on the complexities of the human experience, operating under the philosophy that being human is hard. It's why most people don't do it. Okay? Yeah, because it takes a lot of hard work, and we know that. Okay?
Oh yeah.
So,
That we know.
yeah, right? Tig's writing explores thoughts on the world and actionable ideas to create a better humanity forward world, okay? Often tackling the difficulties of trying to do the right thing, even when it seems simple. We know it's not, right?
It
So,
very rarely
Tig,
is.
right? Tig fosters a space for curious individuals to participate in discussions and supports a vision of a more empathetic society. Tig, I am just honored to have you here today to talk about yourself and your leadership journey and what brought you here to
Uh,
Substack. Thank you.
Never in my life have I seen such a miraculous MC intro. Thank you for that. Oh wow! Oh, I'm pumped now. Thank you for having me on this wonderful show. Hello, all the beautiful peoples. My name is Tig Manzueta. I'm 25 years old. I'm a college student, and yeah, across the board, just happy to be here.
I am honored. So, your journey has been so inspirational to me. And I'm like, you need to come out here and talk to other individuals, in your, age group and beyond, and talk about the things, the trials and tribulations, and how you made it to be the success you are today.
Well, I'd be happy to share my story. Honestly, it's funny you say like the success I am today because it's always a work in progress. I know I seem a lot younger physically than I am mentally, and it's all kind of mismatched. But ultimately, what I've known is that it's always a work in progress. And if today has taught me anything, is that your journey ends when you decide that it ends. And someday, but not today for me. And it doesn't have to be that way for the next person, honestly. Even if it really, really sucks right now, it doesn't have to be that way for the next person, and it may not be that way forever. For where I start, I'm 25 years old. I'm autism, ADHD. I was diagnosed when I was 17. My journey with that is a bit more convoluted, especially because as a person of color, I did not grow up in the typical way that most people would have in my situation. I kind of grew up like upper middle class while simultaneously having the Rosemary Kennedy treatment. My parents were immigrants themselves, and they really, unlike trying to preserve their identity and trying to preserve what seeing a source of pride in the Dominican heritage, because I'm Dominican, I'm Afro Latino myself, first generation American, of course. Something that they wanted to separate themselves from the where they came from entirely and assimilate into American culture as much as possible. As we can see, that's had a lot of mixed results. And when you assimilate fully with a culture that is hostile towards differences, it can really, really do some damage. And over the course of my life, I've had a kind of spent a lot of the last few years in my emancipation and moving away from them and establishing my own humanity and my own life here on my own terms. Really just trying to weigh the reality of significant abuse and significant trauma that I experienced with the reality of the experiences that I would have gained from that from being in that situation. So when you have parents that are like a one woman PTA, that's what my mother was, and she went fully hard into even like I in a similar neighborhood that like right two towns over from Chappaqua. That's where the Clintons live. So that gives you any image of what was like. It was like that. But when you have the like born female on the autism spectrum, very interested in the sciences and the and nerd culture, that was something my parents were not prepared for, or nor were they any acceptance of whatsoever. So, um, from like the age of 12 to age 19, they found a doctor that would basically prescribe them whatever they wanted to basically convince themselves that if they found the right medications, it would create the child that they wanted, which in my position was a child that would give up on college and stay home and care for them in old age. They wanted a caretaker. They wanted both a dog, a doll, and a caretaker. And I didn't want that. And it's kind of hard to gauge that, especially with other like leaders, especially people of color. It's how do you like gauge that story with also like looking like I do and having the experience that I have. And I didn't. I found solace, like in the inner city right now, where I am, my current community, where I found housing, where I found safety, where I found community. It's where they find a lot of people like, why would you want to be here where you can get out? Like I try to do. It's a kind of a reverse. It's kind of an inverse kind of journey. Um, Mainly, it's an inverse of a journey specifically because the lie of suburbia, like the whole, you see suburbia as a white picket fence. It's not. It really isn't, especially if you're not fitting that kind of role, if you're neurodivergent or not fitting the role that was expected of you. Like I wasn't an only child either. I had siblings, but my younger brother was the one supposed to be the one who was the prodigal son. He was supposed to be the one who was successful and go off to college, and my sister was kind of a failed experiment. But even so, like these specific roles that my parents bought into hard, that where they were forced upon me from a very young age, I didn't. Not only did I fit into, but I physically rejected it at numerous points. That ultimately landed me in a in the emergency room more times than not. It was something that honestly a lot of people in my situation wouldn't have survived. And I'm really happy that I have my therapist who I've seen since like I was 18. Like I'm 20, I was since 2018 because she was the first person I met to not only listen and treat me like a human being, but also she was the first person that believed me when I told her that something is very, very wrong about the situation and I need to get out of this. And she listened. And not only did she listen, but she's the one who signed my SPO emancipation paperwork, and she was the one who signed off a lot of things. She was my de facto caseworker for a while, even playing double agent with my parents to get them to stay distracted to for long enough for me to go with FAFSA and go through the FAFSA process because I couldn't afford to emancipate myself the traditional way through the courts. I had to do it on the back end because I knew I couldn't stand a chance in court being as sedated as I was. So I had to taper off myself, along with going to college, and even that it was not an easy fight either. The damage they left behind, that I've had to not to separate from, but also like fight through, like in real time. I've had to, in my experience, working on my bachelor's at Purchase and working on my associates and WCC, I have had to essentially overthrow two admit college administrations to even get the chance of continuing courses. It was a pretty rough situation going into it, knowing that I couldn't be fully honest as to what I was running from with either my friends, my contacts, or my advising team that was on campus. Especially not considering how a few of the administrators were actively abusing, like psychologically, sexually across the board, or allowing the abuse of students to the point where they were hanging themselves in their dorm rooms. And
Oh
growing up
my God.
in yeah, growing up in psych wards, it's not the first time I've seen that kind of sight. I mean, I've cut down a lot of nooses in my time before I was even like, turned 16. It's horrific, and but it wasn't the first time I've seen something like that, and but it didn't scare me, it didn't paralyze me, it traumatized me obviously, but it made me angry because I knew the world that was creeping its way into these institutions, and seeing these kids that had no idea how the mental health system affects people both for good and for worse. There's a long history how psychiatry and medical science, and there's a lot of new blood going into the medical field right now, especially with mental health and otherwise, about people and how these systems affect people of color, especially neurodivergent or other forms of disabled people of color. There's a lot of new blood coming into it, but there's also a lot of baggage that needs to be addressed. Especially because you have a lot of doctors, a lot of even like professionals, like licensed mental health professionals that have been in this field for a decade that worship the DSM-5 while not realizing that the DSM-5 is a document. It is a journal released almost like bi-yearly. It's edited. It can make mistakes. This field of psychiatry has made mistakes just like any other field of science would. And this is why, like, my career path in simple engineering, biochemistry, and marketing, and business and logistics is I find really important work with it because, on one hand, that my love for sciences, and my love for the STEM field, my love for zoology, biology, and engineering, has always been a part of who I am. But also understanding that with every institution led research, when you have research, not only does someone need to pay for it, but someone needs to organize the means of which that payment happens and why that research is being done. And I knew if I was going to go into research, or if I was going to back any of the invest in inventions or projects that I have lined up for the future, I didn't want to be at the mercy of a system I didn't want to be at the mercy of a system that I had no control over a second time around. So that's why I try to really learn into the last year or so, like being either on leave or constantly working my case with a few with my college right now to get back into my degree program. Hopefully, we get back. I get the right answer soon. But even if it's a no, my career path still goes forward and my academic career still moves forward. And I know that even if it's a no on that college, I still made a long lasting change because the people who have caused administrators, whether it be counselors or whatever, have caused serious harm to a lot of people are no longer in power. And that's worth something.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
It,
please go on.
no, Mario, yeah, go with the question. I can go on, I can ramble for hours. Go on. Just go with the question.
No question. It's just basically talk about the actual work that you're doing, because when you reached out to me and asked me for what I would be interested, with all the students that you're working with. Aren't you working with over 4,000 students?
Not 4,000. I'm currently working on a few different ventures with students as well as a lot of other industries right now. My current projects, well, the larger scope of a whole is to create a think tank and a network focused on that human focused world, essentially, to not just rival organizations like the Heritage Foundation and other organizations, nonprofits that back a lot of these operations for harm, but to create a rival, even more powerful organization to not just back my inventions, my projects, but any other ventures we have going forward. And that organization will take take time to build. But my focus right now, I wanted to reach out to you because Margaret, you have an incredible network, you have an incredible skill set, an incredible background, and I wanted to group a coalition of people to build this network going forward. And that's honestly one thing I'm really looking forward to. Right now, the current projects that I have working on right now is one of which is called Phoenix Fire. It is a coding and vocational school that is we're currently transitioning towards turning the tech and programming industry into and transitioning into the trade that it is. Well, it is right now. There's a reason you don't need a master's in civil engineering to be a plumber anymore, is because in the Victorian era, standardized all the technology, and it became that technology went from innovation to infrastructure. It doesn't negate what it is. It doesn't negate the power of it. Doesn't negate how important it is, but it does change the industry, and that also changes the way it needs to be taught. So if you went from a innovation to infrastructure, that's not the end of the world. You just need to treat it like the infrastructure that it is. And that brings hope. But that also means we need to encourage more institutions to move in that direction. And that means the 4 year computer science degrees that you find in a lot of colleges aren't as worth what they're used to. But that's okay. We need to build that alternative if we're going to move away from certain programs that no longer suit us in the past. We need to build that alternative, and that's what Phoenix Fire is for. That's what I'm looking forward to on that front. That's one. Another venture I'm working on right now is with the context of mine. We started a game dev company, so we have our first launch for our first game this year. That's fun stuff. But also, another network I'm a part of called the Gamers, which is an international gaming network for streamers, alumni of the gaming industry, Blizzard, Activision, of women and queer people of color across the board. We have a few trips going to Thailand this year, which is fun. I'm not gonna be able to go, but I wish everyone else
Oh,
loved. Yeah, it wants to go to Thailand. Represent the gamers. I love it. And
okay.
yeah, but ultimately, yeah, but even so, what I'm really looking forward to is building this larger coalition, which is called I call it the Horizon Coalition. It's essentially it reflects that inner philosophy that I have is that if you just keep moving, the sun will come up tomorrow. That much is true. That has been true for the last 10 million years humans existed on this planet, and it will probably continue for the next couple 3 billion years the sun still exists.
I love that. Now you have Tigology, but then you also have Mind Haven. So what do you have? What do you have? Your main one, and then you have all of the other ones under the umbrella. Explain to us your philosophy, your business philosophy.
Oh yeah. So Tautology is the overall brand. So Tautology is also like my main handle, but it's also Tautology the magazine, which is on Substack, where you have my essays. Currently, I'm transitioning Tautology the magazine. A lot of the essays that I've written already, I'm transitioning them as of like this week to video essay style. So I'm transitioning those scripts and recording the voiceover narration for post on YouTube and post on Twitch and other forms of social media, so more people can get access to it. That's Technology the magazine, which is essays not just about my inventions, not just about like my perspective, not just on my mental health and across the board, but also about certain concepts that I'm thinking about along the way. I'm not sure how if anyone here is familiar with with Octavia Butler. Octavia Butler, yeah, she is a well-renowned science fiction writer. She has a wonderful book series, and as well as she has what a lot of people don't realize outside of her science fiction writings, but she also has a long list of essays regarding science fiction in terms of technology. She wrote a long essay series on the ethics and infrastructure and technology needed for artificial wombs, or even like our artificial conception and how that impacts the industry as a whole. And it's interesting because says her essays are both are not pro artificial wombs or not against it either. It's just an exploration as to what that would look like in practice. In practice, it's not great. It's really just
Okay.
yeah, what that would actually require, the amount of logistics required, and the not just the money, not just the business side of things, but also the energy and the human implications of it all. And especially now when we have when the tech industry or even like the United States is currently being slowly taken over by a 5 or 6 nutcase who's still stuck in high school minds. But even so, there's this idea that if you're going to move faster with to develop technology into this cyberpunk style world, either with techno feudalism as it stands right now, it's not only horrific for everyone involved, the path to get there, but in hindsight, it's also not feasible with the infrastructure that we have at the moment. It's not possible. The amount of Octavia Butler, her essays actually explore a lot of like artificial wombs and stuff. And using that as a model, I wrote my first set of insomniac essays in a similar fashion, not in an exploration of a concept and of a device that I currently I hope to have a working prototype in the next 2 to 3 years or so. In terms of my overall business model, technology is the front end marketing side, and then you have a whole bunch of extra additional projects on the back of hand that both supply and funds, and as well move forward the operation. So that's how you have a proper movement. It's you have a you have a front of house that's focused on the marketing, the vision, the philosophy, and you also have a back end that's heavy logistics, heavy business, as well as just more raw like machinery. And you need both in
You
order to have a functional movement.
you have a system thinking mindset. And let's talk about your team, okay? You have Sushi working with you, and and you also have Neil Neil Divergent
Neurodivergent
Hodgepodge.
hodgepodge.
Okay?
Yeah.
Let's talk about your team because they are, you guys are fantastic. Okay?
Oh yeah, with Mindhaven, we have that every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern. It's an open discussion about mental health and our experiences with the system as well as in recovery. We invite a whole bunch of guests on our show, and we just talk about overall just the world and how it relates to mental health. Because if mental health is important to the mind and the human mind is controls everything else without us, I mean, if you think about it, it's kind of amazing. Like the human brain is an organ of fats and lipids and a lot of other components that named itself. That named itself. It's an organ dedicated to the survival of the human body. So, well, naturally, you think it come in a lot of different flavors and shapes. That's why, like, neurodivergence is such a it's kind of a no brainer if you're exploring like Darwin's theory of evolution. Like something you think something as like advantageous as a human brain would come in a lot of different shapes. The same way you think something is advantageous like a bird's beak in general, or a tooth in general. The structure of a tooth coming in a lot of different shapes and forms depending on what environment it's specialized in. The same thing. And that's something that's important into consideration.
Yes. Do you hear me okay? I just wanted to make sure
Yeah,
because I heard.
yeah. I think I cut out for a second, but I think I'm good.
Okay, great, great. You have this brilliant mind, and it's been developing over the course of your life. 25 years old. My God, you are a genius. Okay.
In a clinical sort of way, yes.
Hey, and I'm gonna be working with you, a 25-year-old. I'm on it. I'm like, hey, all right, I'll take that job. Okay. At least
Yeah, and
you're a decent human being. I can work with decent human beings. Okay.
yeah, I mean, we need more people on earth that focus on not only just like do the right thing in the short term, because what is in the right in the short term isn't what always is a net benefit in the long term. I think a lot of people, this is something I've coming to terms with a lot recently, is that there very rarely is like monsters in this world. Like a lot of people will do horrific acts of violence and cruelty, and they'll go along with it specifically because they want to reinforce the idea that they themselves are a good person. But that mentality seems harmless enough. It's like, oh, they think they're trying to do the right thing. They made a mistake. But if you look back a little deeper, you see a long history of where that mentality actually comes from. Something that I've actually been on a sociology kick as of recently. I did a brief stint, a few anthropology courses, and I kind of went down a rabbit hole with a lot of into human behavior and how not just cult psychology, but also how where the line between religion and philosophy begins and ends.
Okay.
Because empires come, empires go, religions die, cult leaders die, but the ideas that they spread tend to last a lot longer. And even when and it kind of become the ideas that kind of maintain itself and sustain itself, and they kind of just go on subversive without anyone actually looking back and seeing where those ideas came from. So this idea of being whether you're a good person or a bad person and how that determines where you are in the world and your status and your existence as a human being, that mentality goes all the way back to puritanical Christianity or even farther back to that, like early like Egyptian mythology. You can see parallels with it, and you kind of see how everything and not just the universe, but everything in human history is kind of connected to each other. you can trace back this idea of whether you're like kind of like fighting for your soul in a way, whether you're a good person or a bad person. If you make a mistake, whether you're like either at the pearly gates in front of St. Peter or measuring your heart against the feather of truth with Anubis, regardless, this idea of I need to be if I can do bad things and still be a good person if the bad thing I did was out of innocence. I will be okay if I said I didn't realize, regardless of what that is. I will be okay as long as I say I didn't realize, I didn't know better. I was just following orders. The insert after the insert term here. But it really comes back to this idea that as to why do we need to believe whether we're a good person or a bad person? And in my experience, especially in my upbringing, because like whether the psychological torment of it all, or especially what I went through in the hospitals and everything else, there is a level of dehumanization that goes into play for a lot of these facilities, as well as like what my parents like how they treat the psychological abuse day in and day out I had to experience with them. And I was constantly told that of how unattractive, how unwanted, how no one would tolerate me, how annoying, how horrible I was on a daily basis by my mother specifically. And it was near constant and to the point where I understood that the person they wanted me to be did not exist. Cognitively, I understood that. But I also understood that what they were not going to stop trying to make that impossibility so. So I had to make a choice. And I chose either to leave and try again or end my life a lot of times. It became very, very scary and very, very, very dark because when you know that your existence as you are as a human being is will never be enough for the person that brought you into this world, it's like, well, what do you want? You won't accept reality and the abuse, the pain won't stop regardless because you won't accept it. And it's been 4 years. I haven't had contact with them since I was able to leave and find safety from it all. But even so, looking back on it now, I'm seeing that I'm able to recognize that they weren't monsters, and very rarely are there monsters in this world. But I find that the average person will be more than happy to throw their lot in with monsters. They'll throw their lot in with anyone that will be willing to reassure them that the world that to reassure them that they don't have to look back and recognize the harm and suffering their actions cause. That the "I didn't know better and I didn't realize" is enough. It very rare it's not. It's not. And
Seems like you
yeah.
it seems like you've done a lot of introspection, okay, on this whole situation. And I have e- experienced similar abuse growing up in a narcissist family. Okay. And so sitting with ourselves, reflecting upon these things, being a visual person, I just put these things like on a whiteboard and just address each issue. Okay, this is my mother wound from being abandoned. Okay, this is my father wound from being physically and verbally abused. Okay, and then anything else, and then I can address each one, of these things. We have to call it out. We have to name it. We have to. Um, we've internalized all these things, but we need to find a way to release it. Release. Okay.
Yeah. And the way I've been able to, found a way to release it because, 25 years is a long time, but not just facing rejection from, your immediate family, but also facing rejection for a lot of people as a whole. And it got me thinking is to this one question that I asked a counselor of mine over at WCC, and I asked her, "Why do they hate me more than they want to make things better?" This was at the end of 2024, about 3 weeks after the 2024 election happened. She didn't have an answer, I stumped her, and I didn't have an answer either. But after the last year, I think I might have figured it out. It's this parallel because everyone wants to make the world a better place, but I think they really disagree as to how. Because for one reason or another, they're either looking at the short term, "Oh, we can make this like we can change the name of this thing and that'll make it all better." Or we can look at the long term doing the right thing, which means looking into the infrastructure, the systems at play, all these logistics that go into making things better is a lot harder to do. And that also means looking back and seeing, okay, maybe this caused more damage than I anticipated, or maybe this method of going about things isn't as beneficial as I thought it was, or maybe I was taught the things I was taught in in my training as a mental health counselor, as a doctor, was either based in a long-standing of bias, a long-standing of prejudice, has a really wrong history, or even if the treatment was correct, because you actually look into obstetrics, like the history of gynecology, where how that started with experimentation on black slave women by a physician who was a Confederate physician. This man, this white man, he was the quote unquote the godfather of gynecology, and he experimented on black slave women during the time when they were doing like breeding stock programs in the South. And specifically, he came up with a lot of techniques to treat things like birth fistulas, and he also like paved the way for the modern C-section away from the original purpose of this chainsaw. It's a horrific history. That was originally what the chainsaw was for back in the day, by the way.
Oh my,
Horrific stuff. And he moved away. It's like, yeah, there has to be a cleaner way to do this. But
I guess.
even so, even so, it was he developed a lot of the techniques that he developed by horrific means are still used to this day because they work. And they work because he tailored them to be able to use these same techniques on white women who give birth. And it's horrific. And I think it's like we're at a point, not into the sciences, not just in the medical field, in the field of psychiatry, not just in the sciences, but across the world. How do we gauge what we can take from the past and the horrific means that knowledge was acquired with the reality with the horrific methods? Like, how can we use the techniques that he developed that really work, that have saved millions of lives since, with the reality of how that knowledge of how those techniques were developed? And it's not an easy answer. And that means looking back and seeing a lot of, not just in terms of the medical field, not just in terms of psychiatry, but in a lot of other systems as well. Like, how do we, I mean, I'm on the autism spectrum. What I had to go through was because I wasn't on the autism spectrum. What we're seeing right now in this new move of neurodivergence acceptance and being able to treat people on the spectrum, people with ADHD, as human beings instead of institutionalize them, like what my parents tried to do. That's a relatively new phenomenon, specifically because of young people like me who got chewed up and spit out by the system, who realized this is fucked up. There has to be a better way to go about this. And we're leading the charge, and we're trying to advocate for ourselves to make sure that even if it's too late for us, the next people that comes after us don't have to suffer the same way. There has to be a better way to go about things, and it's also turning around and recognizing that even sometimes, even if you're trying to do the right thing, even if they have the best of intentions, it still caused harm. And that's something a lot of people have a hard time grappling with, is that it goes back to that good person, bad person mentality. It's like, I'm a good person. I can't have caused harm, because if I cause harm, that makes me a bad person. That implodes their entire worldview. But it's moving away from that old mentality of what was expected, of what was the life you were supposed to grow up and achieve, and into a space that's kind of unknown. And that's honestly why I'm trying to build the Horizon Coalition as it is. That's my whole philosophy. It's still going. It's by no means set in stone. It's fluid, it's growing, but it's also really focused on, well, the one thing we do have that is consistent. It's not the nuclear family. It's not go to college, get a job like it was pitched in the 80s, because that was never the case either. That was a manufactured thing. The war on drugs was a manufactured thing to hurt people. All of it was. And it really comes down to, well, if all of this is bullshit, then what is real? The one thing we can rely on, sun comes up the next day. The horizon's consistent. And if that's consistent, then that's enough. At least for now. We
Yeah,
can move
right.
forward.
Exactly. This has been an amazing conversation. Let me see if anybody has any questions or comments.
Yeah, I'm checking the chat too. Hi, Sushi. Hi, Duro. Oh, my godmother here. My godmother's here. Hi, Evie.
All right. Excellent. So, you're building all of these things. You have such a exquisite mind. And for me, running this publication and trying to expand my network and everything, I'm working alone. And so it can be challenging. So that's why I try to focus on the things that I enjoy. Okay. Which I enjoy talking to people,
Hmm.
building, cultivating, and nurturing relationships because that's how we are able to grow, okay, and help others to grow as well. Okay, so in our business model, I focus on the things that brings me joy, that I'm passionate about, and that um, increases my energy and everything else versus the things that don't. Those are things that I eliminate from my business model. Okay. And so do I actually have a business model written down? No, it's a concept. Okay, it's a concept, which changes,
It's fluid, it's growing, and that allows for growth to happen. You know, if something's set in stone, if it's rigid, it makes it hard to grow. And you need to be something to be able to grow. Yeah. I mean, diamonds are pretty, but they're also very brittle. It's not about like it's not just being strong and rigid, it's about being anti-fragile. And that requires a little bit of flexibility, being able to pivot, see something that works, and being able to adapt.
That's why I knew that you and I was going to work well together. You know what I'm saying? Because we think alike. And when you have people with the same mindset, okay, and your values are in alignment, there's nothing that we can't create together, okay, to help this
Exactly.
world succeed. Okay, and when you reached out to me, I said, yes, yes, let's do
Just
this because that is what we were called to do. Okay, God brings people in our lives for a reason, and we need to take advantage of these opportunities. Not advantage, because some people do take advantage. I'm not saying
yeah,
that.
it's
You know what I'm
oh
saying?
yeah, it's one thing to use it's one thing to make the most of an opportunity. It's another thing to abuse it. You can use something, or
Exactly.
you can abuse it, or you can do. It's one thing to use it too much, and I think that having that balance of that balance is always some. It's always a battle. It's a tricky one, and it honestly goes back into like that objective as to what your business model is, what your focus is, and for me, that focus is it's kind of like it's like a more nuanced utilitarian perspective if you're familiar with it. It's not how can I make the maximum amount of impact into the most amount of people. It's not about being fully positive or fully negative. It's not about any absolute. It's not about being a good person or a bad person. Is the bottom line is my impact, my existence in this world has impact. I am a person in part of a larger world that every decision I make has impact. And it confuses me when people say, "Oh, I don't give a fuck what anybody else thinks of me." It's like that's not good either. It's not good to be
Okay.
paralyzed, and it's not good to be overly oblivious over the impact that you have either. You got to have a little bit of mix of both. You got to be self-aware enough to know where you screwed up sometimes, but also confident enough to not let the rejection or needless prejudice stop you from doing what you need to do.
So what you're talking about is the messy middle. Okay. So we got to
Yes.
stay in the middle here. Okay.
Yeah, and having
People.
yeah, and being in the middle is really, really hard to do. And it's like having that balance like just think of it like this way. If you're trying to stand in the middle of like a little tower of like a lever right there, it's easier to fall over one side to another and just stay put and stay on your butt. But staying in the middle, that takes time and that takes work. And
And
that's something that a lot
patience.
of and patience and dedication. And you're gonna fall a lot. You're gonna fall 1,000 times until you get it right for a little while longer, and then you'll fall again. But then you're gonna get back up to it. And that's honestly what it comes down to. It's like it's one thing, and I think that's a lot. That's why I end up butting heads with a lot of people my age because when my upbringing gave me a lot of perspective on the world, not just on the nuances of it, but because I've been dehumanized for so long that I kind of felt like spit out from the whole stream as a whole. It's like I felt like I was kind of floating in space, seeing all of this system from a distance. And on one hand, it's kind of heartbreaking because it's hard for other people to connect with me on like an interpersonal level in that regard. But it's also really, really useful because I can see, I can see, for instance, like there was a situation I had an interpersonal argument with a few people at a student government association that I was fighting with at the time. They wanted to stage a pro-Palestine protest, and I'm like, this is knowing how the administration handles things. knowing what they've done, how many people they've hurt in the past. It's like this is a bad idea. You're walking into an ambush. You know that, right? It's like we don't care, and they went ahead with it anyway, and we're genuinely confused as to why are the police attacking us? They genuinely did not understand. They thought if they stood in solidarity, holding hands and saying no more, then the opposition would just rip off their shirts and call it and say, "You may have lost this battle, but you gained our respect, and that's more important," like a Disney Channel original movie villain or something. And that got me thinking as to how we learn, like how my generation learned how movements operate. Like, remember when I said like you need a backup house and a front of house? The backup house, I think, well, like I grew up in the 2000s, learning about like Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement. They purposely left out how the backup house actually worked, how the Black Panthers were actually in charge of distributing funds and distributing supplies, especially not just for the civil rights movement, but also for the Americans with Disability Act protests that gave rise to 504 and everything we have right now in terms of SSI and support for people like myself with various different disabilities, but also in regards to union strikes and labor rights that were not only backed by the Black Panthers, but were also backed by the mob, the mafia, and various cultures. And all
Yeah,
that
because you
kind of
can't
came
get.
down. Yeah.
You're right, because the mafia controls everything, the commerce within the states and everything within.
Well, they used to anyway. They used to. It wasn't a matter of controlling everything. It was really just you had a few like quote unquote organized crime groups that were said to be, but really they were just people that organized in their neighborhoods, organized within their communities. And if you're going on strike against a union, if you're going on a union strike, then you call so such and so's family to talk to the landlord, and you wouldn't be out in your butt homeless. That was the safeguard. That was you'd still be able to take care of yourself if you're striking. You wouldn't be all out. You wouldn't be discrepant. You wouldn't be sacrificing everything for this, for doing the right thing for this movement. And that's what the mafia in a way was kind of for. It was kind of a network between families, and of course, yeah, you have the kneecap busting for security measures and all that crap. But ultimately, it was really just ensuring that community members would stay together. You would actually have be able to take care of your family, be able to take care of your house, and even if you had infiltration by the police, it would be a lot harder for them to get a hold of things than it is right now. And that's part of the reason why the war on drugs actually kind of happened. There was a cabinet member from Reagan's cabinet, who actively admitted in a CBC interview back in like 2004 or so that, like, yeah, if we could associate heroin with the blacks and marijuana with the hippies or liberal rights movements or union movements, then we can crack down on their organizations and shut off any way they have at moving the movement forward. Because without the backup house, the movement would be crippled.
I remember because we was talking about Black Power and everything. So
Hmm.
that was when J. Edgar Hoover was in office. So they like, okay, we're gonna flood the cities with the heroin. Then they will quit talking about this Black Power stuff. But what they failed to realize, their own people was falling subject to becoming addicted off of heroin, and then they had to come out with other drugs, to get off of the heroin. Okay, and
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned heroin because in the 1800s, heroin is originally patented by Bayer. You know, the aspirin people. It was actually Ren it was this was before the Food and Drug Administration was established by Theodore Roosevelt, for good reason, actually. Theodore Roosevelt established the Food and Drug Administration because prior to this was like the early 1800s or so. Prior to that organization being put in place in the federal government, you had like food giants, drug giants, like Bayer was selling heroin. Actually, one it was like raw. That was what he would sell. So like, oh, okay, here's a pain. You have a kid that broke his leg and something in the coal mines. Take some heroin back to the coal mines with you. That's how it was done. And you also had like food industry, candy, like you had food manufacturers. Like, you ever heard the term "mad as a hatter"? That's because the dye they were using in clothing as well as confectionaries was dyed green with an arsenic derivative. So the whole "mad as a hatter" quote comes from the people, the hat makers, who would be in close contact with this arsenic laden green dye and would therefore suffer the effects of arsenic poisoning, including but not limited to psychosis, hair loss, etc. It was actually debated at the time because when Napoleon was exiled the third time around with the establishment of the French Republic that we have today, Napoleon was exiled to this island off the coast of Sicily, and the wallpaper that he had around him in this like nice little house on this private island that he was supposed to stay there for the rest of his life was bright green. He died in that bedroom because the wallpaper was dyed green with that same arsenic ridden dye. And it said that bed bugs would not go into rooms with green wallpaper. And that's how they figured out that they use the dye, the ingredients in the dye, as a pesticide instead of a dye, instead of a textile thing. But before any of that, this is what was done. You had people canning meat with formaldehyde. You had people making spam with lead. It was gross. It was nasty. And that's why Theodore Roosevelt established the Food and Drug Administration as a regulatory body.
And let's not talk about lead, okay? Because I used to work for the government, and we used to go into these places to remove the lead off
Hmm.
the seals and stuff like that because the children was eating it and it was causing birth defects. So they had to get rid of the lead out of all the homes, okay? So
Hmm.
they paid the Corps of Engineers to go in there, and we basically observed the work being performed, okay? So
Yeah,
yeah.
and exactly. And the only reason we have to do that cleanup now is because at the end of the 70s and late 80s, you had a resurgence of a lot of these like old money, like old tycoons from like these old money tycoons, robber baron types from the 1800s that were pissed about the reforms that Theodore Roosevelt and FDR made to crack down on their industries and regulate so people stop dying from lead poisoning. They actually lobbied Congress to cripple the FDA's power from the late 70s to the early 80s. And that gave rise to the supplement industry, as well as the whole fat is the enemy, like sugar filled, fat free snacks, as well as lead poisoning and everything, lead paint, asbestos, etc. Because without the FDA's,
Supersize,
yeah, exactly, all of
supersize
it.
all of this stuff, okay? And then
Yeah, especially
the
yeah,
young people that's eating all this crap that they put in the foods are dying early from cancer because of eating all this shit.
yeah,
Okay?
and it's not just that, it's, like, everything, and it's awful because they basically in, like, the late '80s or so, they lobbied a then Republican-controlled Congress to cripple the FDA's power from the inside, essentially, like, slash as much funding as possible to make it impossible for the FDA to actually do their job until somebody actually gets hurt. So you have to have a solid outbreak, a laundry list of victims of lead poisoning, of colon cancer from bacon and everything to be able to do anything about them. That was by design. It was
This
essentially
reminds
just
me
yeah.
this remind me of that movie about where they was putting those chemicals. What was that movie with Cher in that movie? It was some famous. No, it was um I see her. Julia Roberts. Julia Roberts was in that movie. It was some city. Okay. She was a lawyer. She was trying to, these people was putting all this.
Yes.
What was the name of that movie with Julia Roberts?
I don't remember the name of the movie, but it honestly coincides with everything. Essentially, this was never there was never the mafia, it was never the Black Panthers, it was never like the mob controlling everything. That was never the case. It was always the robber barons from the 1800s trying to get their power back, what they missed from the Gilded Age. That was always the goal. And there was a lot of attempts throughout history, and it also came back to undo that Theodore Roosevelt and FDR put in place. Yeah,
The,
yeah, I just cut off for a second, but that's okay. It's all about undoing those reforms that actually makes things better for the average person. And and it wasn't much honestly because FDR was really in favor of redlining policies. There's a whole shit show in itself. But even so, it was all just going back to the Gilded Age. That was always the plan. And knowing that that was always the plan, that will be the default. And even so, like how easy it was for them to lobby Congress and cripple the FDA, cripple the IRS so that you have to pay a third party private corporation like TurboTax, H&R Block to do your taxes for you, essentially. That was a thing too. That was a thing within my lifetime. And it all came back to regardless of how you do it, it's going to default. It's not enough to dismantle everything we have right now. You have to replace it with something else.
So it's always a way when they get in there is how to extract money from citizens like you and I. Okay,
Yeah.
not to our benefit because they remove all of this clean air and all of these things, and they take that money and put it in their pockets, and because their kids still have to breathe the air. Okay, but they don't have to drink the water. They don't have to eat the food because they're getting the top. of everything brought to them. Okay.
Yeah, and it sucks because there's really the profit for the sake of profit only there's an end to that. There's only so far you can extract. There's only so much you can extract resources from the vast majority of people before you start to feel the effects of it too. But and they know that because Theodore Roosevelt actually like fed a lot of the bureaucrats, a lot of the old school like tycoons in the meat industry. He fed them the same thing that they were feeding to everyone else, and it was disgusting. And that's how they went along with the FDA to begin with. But where it is right now is that they know that the destruction that they're creating is damaging to them. They know that. They know that there is it's not profit. Yeah, they don't care because what it is, it's about ego. It's about control. What it is that they want to reestablish themselves as the emperor of the ashes. They're trying to destroy, quote unquote, destroy the world so they can rule over as the emperor of the wasteland. It's destruction for its own sake, and it really has no purpose. And that's honestly the only that's how and that going back to what I was saying about how mentalities and how ideas kind of spread and pass over time. That's really where that like good person versus bad person, old school puritanical Christianity mentality. That's where it ends because ideas can only last for so long and still be healthy, but eventually they will age, and eventually they don't age well.
No, and they say, "Oh, well, I'm 50," and they look 70.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there's a reason that like the French stopped using guillotines in the 70s. That was the last execution in France via guillotine in like 1974. There's a reason because times change, and there's only so long you can keep holding on to that. I need to be the slave master mentality before it just falls out of fashion completely. Before it just doesn't
That's
work
what
anymore.
Right. That's why it's so important that we're doing this work here and we're
Hmm.
creating these communities, okay? And because they have their own communities, their, whatever, cults, whatever. So we
Hmm.
we need to have our group, we need to have empowerment within our community so we can help others
Yeah.
rise, okay?
Yeah, and it's also having a hard it's also having a really difficult conversation and going to the drawing board as to what we want the future to actually look like. Because if all we know is what has been done in the past, then we'll never move forward. It's not enough just to dismantle the current system at hand and call it a day. You have to replace it with something else. Having a
Better.
little band-aid reform. Yeah, something better. And that
That's what
means
you're doing. That's what
yes.
you're doing. That's what each and every one of us are doing. So how can we utilize that and raise our voice together? Like raise the voice so the world can hear and wake the fuck up.
Yeah, it's on one hand waking up and raising our voice. That's front of house. That's great, but on its own, it's not enough. We also need to have the backup house. We need to have the infrastructure. We also need to not just create organizations and create alternatives for resources that we already have. In terms of like Phoenix Fire creating a vocational school, we need more teachers. We need more farmers. We need more agriculturalists in order to replace that. But what we also need is a transitionary plan. And that's honestly where I'm really excited on the civil engineering, the science, and that's where things come into play for me because my current project that I'm working on right now is called a compost reactor. Essentially, and this is one of my first essays that I wrote. Insomnia Essays #1. Actually, this is in favor of this and how this works and essentially is a device that uses it's a biofuel synthesizer. So essentially you take anything you'd find in a landfill that isn't made of metal, you put it into this chamber, it blends it up together, and using a very specialized ecosystem of bacteria, it converts it into ethanol and methane to supplement and eventually replace the fossil fuel industry to give time for the electrical grid to catch up to the make the most of solar, wind, and other forms of renewables because we have solar, we have wind, and we have all these renewable sources of power. But what we don't have is an electrical infrastructure and a sewage infrastructure to make the most of it. It's like trying to charge a BlackBerry with an iPhone charger. We have the iPhone charger, it's high tech, but a BlackBerry infrastructure. It works well enough, you jam it in hard enough, but I think we need time to do better, and that takes time and effort and work. And that's what the compost reactor it gives us a bit more time in the face of climate change to make that work. It's a
What
stopgap.
I what I want to know is how do you find the time and the energy to create all of these things?
Well, it's just a matter of how do I find the time and the energy? I put this is my time. This is my energy. It's not about finding time. It's about just integrating what the time that you have into making the most change that you can. It's not about like it's not about sacrificing one thing or another. I think that's like another mentality that needs to go. It's like if you're trying to improve upon, like, say, like you're trying to like have a business, a very successful corporation, and you're trying to make more revenue to make more product. You don't start slashing things. You don't start slashing things and cutting costs. You don't start by balancing the budget. You start by consolidating things to make things more efficient. You don't start by going in and running through a thing and breaking things like Doge tried to do with all that craziness. What you need to do is look at what departments can work together in a more efficient way. Where can technology be used to streamline that process? You look at taking different departments, different systems, different organizations, and merging them together on the bottom of it first. Then you can have the system be a little bit more efficient, and that will bring in more revenue in the long term.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Had you ever thought about running for political office? Because I would vote for you.
I have thought about it, yes, but right now I think I'm on. That's honestly why I'm doing the civil engineering aspect of it, because there are a lot of people my age and a lot of people either like within my age group and older or younger than me that would be a lot better in the front of house political office than I would be. I tend to be I have to work myself up to be a little bit more presenter wise because I can do a TED talk, I can do a podcast, I can pitch it like no other. But in terms of working, constantly in front of the camera, that's something I'm not great at. I need my space. I need to be able to shut the door and, like, then grind at what I'm working on and look like a hot mess doing it. Yeah, but I need to have that space, but I also know it's all about knowing where your value lies and knowing where your skills will be most valuable. And I have big dreams and I have big plans and I plot and I scheme, I do all of this, but I've also known that that I personally have my best dreams in the dark. I do my best work in behind the scenes, and I think that's something that needs to be shown more. I think we need to have more openness and more conversations about what it takes to be the back of house because it's something I've noticed that I'm going to be quoting Rick and Morty a little bit here. This one slip for Rick and Morty. I don't know if you're familiar. The average person would be incredibly bored but the actual like running movements, activism, and the actually working towards achieving the changes that they want to see in the world. Because it's not an adventure. It's not a 30-minute protest. It's not something you can go in, call it a day. It's not cinematic. It's work. It's messy, backbreaking, thankless work. And it's kind of like people who want to, yeah, it's like people who want to like own a pony and go ride away in the sunset. Horse ranching, you spend most of your time knee deep in shit. And there's some people who are okay with that and they love it and they pour their heart and soul into it. And there's some people who'd rather die. Each of us gets to
It,
choose.
it that's right. It is what it is. This has been such an amazing conversation, Tig. For people in your age group and beyond, I have learned so much from you. For 25 years old, I'm like, oh my God, you are a genius. For real. You're a genius.
Thank you. Oh wow. Yeah, I think we need like I'm trying to like use my voice a little bit more and show that there is a way forward. Not just a way forward, but also like what was expected of us before, like what was it's okay that the future is not what we were promised. It's still worth fighting for. There's a lot of disillusionment, especially with young men and women in my age. It's like, oh, well, how am I supposed to start a family? How am I supposed to have a career? The world that we were told that we were supposed to aspire to that, one, it probably never existed in the first place. It never existed in the first place. And if it did, it's long gone by now. So I think we need to really reconsider and go to the drawing board as to what we want our future to look like because it's not going to be the one we were promised. It's not going to be the one we were told we should achieve, but it's still ours. And that's worth something.
Yes, it is. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on and do this live because I felt that it was needed, especially now. Okay. And you are a positive role model in the community. I will make sure to include your links. And I encourage everybody to follow Tig and to subscribe. Tig is amazing, and I'm glad you reached out to me, and I'm looking forward to working with you. Okay, and
I'm looking forward to it.
yeah, thank you so much for reaching out, and you're amazing. And you have any final words or any recommendations or suggestions to people?
Be a good human. Be a good human. And that means doing the best that you can with what you can. It's something. It's
There it
still worth
is.
something. My God, thank you so much for this opportunity to speak on your live, Margaret. It really means the world. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope to see you all very soon. And we are in this together, and we're gonna. It won't be the world we thought it was, but it's still worth something. It's not gonna be perfect, but it's better than today, better than it was yesterday. That's what tomorrow is. That's what the Horizon Coalition is for. The sun will rise tomorrow, and it's going to be a little bit better. That's what we're here for.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I'm honored to walk this journey with you. Thank you so much. And
Thank
thank
you
you
so
to you
much.
as well. All right. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.